Good afternoon, James. Thanks for joining me on the Q.A.C. team podcast. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic. Thank you so much
Awesome.
for having me.
Absolutely. I really appreciate you coming on and taking the time to tell your story. Let's go ahead and get started and tell the audience more about who you are and what you do.
Sounds great. I'm a wildlife artist. I'm James Corwin, and I have been painting professionally for 11 years now as an oil painter. And I think it's been exciting these last couple of years to start inspiring artists and sharing my story of how artists or anybody in a creative field can truly have a successful career doing what it is they love to do, and whether that's art or even writing music or being an author. And and just by utilizing the right business tools and knowledge, you can truly have a very lucrative career as an artist. Is that something that you're choosing to do, and actually try and break that stereotype of being a starving artist?
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that, right? And as we go through these questions here, I just want to preface this conversation with my youngest daughter.
Mhm.
She's a very good artist herself. And, you know, Yeah, and that's one of the questions that we talked about was, how lucrative can it be? And, I really want to, share the story. I hope she watches this, and really gets inspired by the story because she's really, really good, you know?
Fantastic. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So tell the audience a little bit about, how you turned this into a business. Why'd you decide to be a business owner with this? I'm really inspired to hear the story.
Sure. Well, I've always been passionate about business. I think it's hard to say what really came first. Was it a passion for business or a passion for art? I want to say it was business, and I'm always teaching myself more about business through podcasts and reading. I didn't go to a business school. To and to apply what I'm learning, and mostly it's through doing. And so I know a lot of other creatives and artists. They don't go to business school, and a lot of times, like I went to art school, but I don't attribute what I learned in art school to what I do now. I tell people I'm self-taught. For a lot of artists, I know they're self-taught as well. And so the exciting thing is that you can self-teach the business as well. And it's certainly never or hasn't been an easy journey. Um,
It
as
never
as
is it? It never is.
no,
Anything we do.
no. And I'm sure that can be said for, any business field.
Yes.
But I think what I try to encourage artists who really want to grow their business in art, and start achieving more sales and more recognition with their art is really you you really have to take the bull by the horns
Yeah.
and put in the work and be diligent about doing the work every single day, and but doing the right work efficiently. And what that looks like, and what I found um, is a lot of it. What I'm realizing after looking past over the last 11 years is how important relationships are. And uh, art is very much a relationship business. Um, and I think that can apply to a lot of different creative fields. But as artists, we put a lot out, kind of putting our emotions out on our sleeves, or putting our personality and ourselves out there. And that aspect of ourselves invites people in to then engage with us and have conversation about the work that we created and why
Yeah,
we created this certain piece and what it means to the viewer, to the artist, and
sure.
that cultivates relationship and ultimately what can help sell a piece of art. And when somebody's buying art or a product, are they buying the art itself or are they buying a piece of you? And if you can really cultivate those relationships, a lot of these collectors will purchase from you again and again, and it can compound itself over the years so
Yeah,
that, you know, by the time you've been painting for, a decade, you can have thousands of collectors who have purchased your work over those years
yeah,
that you can now present new pieces to.
yeah,
And and so it gets better every single year, but it's important to nurture those relationships. And
yeah,
as far as bringing new people in to this, what I like to think of now is almost a family um, of um, of my collectors is, of course, marketing. That's been incredibly beneficial for the business
yeah, sure.
and running, ads on Facebook and Google to just get the work seen, because that's really important too for anyone that is just starting or maybe struggling to realize their goals and what they want to see for their art business.
Mm,
And it's really important to get as many eyes seeing your work. And there are
absolutely.
so many wonderful resources out there now as far as platforms like Etsy and eBay, Amazon, Wayfair, Pinterest, and then your website and all the social media platforms. Like
Yeah, right.
anytime you
Yeah,
create a new piece of work or just a progress photo, it should be posted on all those sites
yeah.
because um, because it's just opportunities for eyeballs.
Oh, absolutely, right. Yeah, and I want to mention real fast. I'm glad you talked about that because, my daughter and I will we talk about artwork, and you look at a piece, and you say to yourself, is that part of that artist? You look at what they created, and you
Right.
say, everybody interprets that picture different. You know,
Yes.
and who purchases that, it means something to them. You didn't purchase it because it didn't mean nothing to you,
Right.
so, and she always talked about, painting a piece that inspired from you, but someone else looks at it and says, I like that. I want that piece.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah, yeah. So, we talked a little bit about how, you're not sure what chose the business or the art, and we kind of talked a little bit about, where you went with the business and how, because you got into business with and you're a painter. So let's talk a little bit about what some of the challenges that you faced, by saying, okay, you're a painter, now you want to make a business out of this. So what are some of the challenges you tied into both of those ideas?
Man, there's
I'm sure
a
there's several,
lot.
right?
Yeah. Where do I begin?
Where do I begin, right?
I don't. I mean, there's certainly some challenges that I face every day that um, I'm always trying to figure out, and that's how to have more time at the easel.
Mm,
Um, I have a team of employees now, and and I it's one thing to train them and to employ people to help buy back some of your time and delegate some of the things you do, but of course it still needs management, and so that
yeah,
takes time. um
yeah,
yeah, so and checking in and everything, and so and I still love obviously the business side of it. So I want to also be in helping optimize and strategize new things to grow the business. So, I'll
Yeah.
be painting and then I'll get an idea and I'm like, oh, I should tweak this one thing on my website that might help like conversion. So then I'm like on my computer for a couple hours, like, you know, redoing that. But so yeah, it's always a challenge to get more time at the easel because that's, you know, I think what's most important or where my time is most valuable. Other challenges that I'm definitely getting better at recognizing are distractions where there might be business opportunities that are, either business adjacent or it could be even unrelated, but it could be additional revenue streams for the business.
Mhm.
But those distractions can actually be, you know, uh, quite financially intensive
Oh,
if they're not carefully checked, and that can be
gotcha.
both in my time as a resource. Um, so, because there's certainly been times where I've taken things on, like launching an online art courses. That seems like that would be. A great opportunity that's in line with what I do, and I can capture a large audience of people who want to learn how to paint like I paint. But I
Mhm.
also learned through that how much time it takes to film each class and edit the videos and upload. And then I have to go out and market it and find the people and all that. And then you get the people in, and then at the end of the day, you're like, oh, wow, I only made like $10,000 on this, and I could have painted a $10,000 painting in like 2 days, and this
Yeah,
took
I'm
me two
glad you
months.
mentioned that. I'm glad you mentioned that part about the filming because we can relate on that part because
Yeah,
it takes an art, it takes a skill to you just can't go out there and film and make it work.
absolutely.
Yeah, it takes a couple of takes and moving and doing things around and looking at the angles and it's definitely interesting.
It is, I know. And I'm always, trying to figure that out with just social media posting too.
Yeah, that's been my challenge too, is learning which platform to put what type of social media on to get the attention, because I'm
Oh
not
yeah.
good at that. And I'm still trying to figure that out between TikTok, Facebook, Instagram,
Same.
and especially on LinkedIn, right? Because that's more professional.
Yeah.
And it's been a
Yeah.
struggle. Yeah, the social media has really been a struggle for me.
Oh, me too. Me too. And I think it's interesting because Facebook has always been my best platform and where I seem to be able to generate the most interest and sales in my work. Um, but and so I put a lot of time into that. But every platform is obviously different, and I think they're all valuable, but with the time I have, it's hard to really um, uh, put the time into cultivating an audience in each one because each audience is different.
Yes. I feel your pain because I have a folder dedicated to just stuff to post to social media. And all right, where am I going to put this? Where should I put this? Should I take a snippet of this podcast? So should I take a snippet of video of this show?
That's so true.
Yeah, it's been a challenge. Yeah. But it's a work in progress, right? And that's what I like to share with you. I know you're still a work in progress. You're still figuring out how to make it work and how to make things get smoothed out and best bang for your buck. And that's why
Yeah,
we're having a conversation, because I love to share stories of how people go from the beginning of starting their business to where they are now.
yeah,
And I hope to be able to reach back out to you in, 2, 3, 4 years from now to see how you've grown, because that's
yeah,
the other side of this, is to see where you go in 3 or 4 years with it and see how we're doing.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And I think with my growth too is I invest a lot of what I make back into my business, whether it's hiring more people or opening more galleries or more marketing. And but with that, it comes at I think a cost to how quickly perhaps I could grow or strategically because I have this X amount and how do I allocate it most efficiently to get the most growth out of my business that isn't taking my time away, but from the easel, but also can really, capture more, capital for the business.
Yeah,
And it's always been tricky to figure out what that is, but I am always trying and doing and applying, and then but I'm also nimble enough that I can skirt and make
yeah,
quick changes or stop things,
yeah,
which
yeah.
has been really helpful in growing
Yeah.
too.
What a great segue. You talked about all this growth and different things that are happening. Great segue into, one of my next final questions, is what are your expectations for you and your business in the next year or two? Where do you see yourself going with this?
Yeah, um, I obviously like to see growth in numbers from a business standpoint, but what I have really learned over the last couple of years is um, now that the business continues to bring in new collectors and returning collectors and financially stable and have the employees and everything. It's what's been really exciting is now my creative attention has been going towards both reconnecting with these relationships because again that has become even more apparent how important that is, and then two, how enjoyable it is to just be in the process of the whole business every single day. Like I wake up really excited now to be working in this role. And I think that has come too from going through quite a few really challenging times that were so stressful they like put me in the hospital.
Oh,
But
wow.
like those levels of stress, I I it's like I when I hit those again, the magnitude of that gets less and less every time. So when I hit these like road bumps and these really challenging things, I'm like, oh God, I hate this, but I've been here before and I know how to get through it and
Yeah,
just kind
good,
of
good.
look at it. And so that's been really helpful because with this business it's so cyclical, right? There's the good months, in May is always one of the worst performing months of the year, so I go into that knowing, and I just got out of May and I'm like, that was rough. You know,
Right.
but it's like yeah, it's like every year it's just I just get through it, and now we're into
Yeah,
summer, which is much better. But I
right,
think
right.
I think it's overall a bit more enjoyable. So where I see the business in the next year or two is um, is continuing to enjoy the process of the growth and not be so focused on these targets like I need to be making X amount or have this many art shows or galleries or sales by the end of the year, because that's how I used to operate, and it'd be really motivating to aim for that, but also very stressful when you fall short or it's not quite getting there. And I feel like I miss the pleasures of the journey along the
Yeah.
way.
Yeah, you missed that. Yeah, you missed the mark of what you were looking for, and now you feel like you disappointed yourself, so it puts that extra pressure on you. Yeah, I'm the
Yeah.
same way. I have a high expectation of myself, and when I don't reach my goals, I get really, worked up. And I'm learning to really work on that and be like, "You're okay. Take its baby steps." You know. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So how do we reach out to you? How do we contact you to see your fine art and to enjoy
Yeah.
what we're looking at?
Yeah, yeah, it's well, my name's James Corwin, Corwin. So if you punch that into Google, my website, jamescorwin.com will come up and you can search and browse all the artwork there, or you can see it on Instagram or Facebook, James Corwin. So yeah, just search James Corwin and fine art and all the beautiful artwork will come up, and I'd love to hear from all of you. And please send me a message that you listen to this podcast.
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to talk real quick about, some of the artwork behind you. But before we do that, I just want to say when I browsed your website when you first reached out to me about this podcast, I was impressed at where you have your art across the country. Congrats to you.
Thank you, thank you. Yeah, and it kind of
And I can see your stress level from that because you're everywhere.
I know, and for sure. Like even in this frame here, I got these egrets that I'm painting to send to South Carolina, and on my other side, I have a moose and winter painting that I have here in Montana. So I'm working both sides of the country right now.
Yeah, I'm impressed, and so before if we go here, we talked about, this artwork as a give us a pointer on anybody who's wanting to be a painter,
Mhm.
to get into this kind of business and doing art. What's one thing you would love to tell our audience if they're inspired to be a painter? What's the one thing you would tell our audience?
Yeah, that it is certainly possible to do it full time and have a career as an artist. But what you put in is what you get out. And I wouldn't say a lot of the more traditional models for artists was to get your art into a gallery and just create art in your set. But nowadays, I think galleries are great. I own a gallery, but I I don't think that's the one way. And artists need to really take their own career into their own hands and put in the work and the time and the marketing to bring attention to their work and not rely on art galleries to do that for them, but instead have galleries as just an additional, opportunity to sell art.
Yeah. So, are we talking like a physical walk-in gallery, virtual galleries, or both?
Both, yeah. I
Both.
mean,
Gotcha.
galleries are great for getting your art into a market to be sold, of course, but there are so many opportunities for artists to do that themselves now online, and they should because it really teaches you how to market your own art and then also it gives you insight into the market itself and what people are looking for and how they're responding to the art you're creating. And something that I didn't quite touch on, but I think is also really important is to obviously stay authentic and true to the kind of art you create, but it's also important to create artwork that, for lack of a better word, is appealing and marketable. And, I used to paint landscapes, but I found that I could paint wildlife better and wildlife was more marketable because, everybody knows what an elephant is. But if I were to paint this mountain outside my window, which is beautiful, not everybody would know what that mountain is, and I probably couldn't try and sell that mountain in Florida, but an elephant I could.
Gotcha. So, one last question. I just thought about this. How important is it when you have artwork on a site and you're trying to sell it, and people are asking you questions about a particular piece?
Mhm.
How important is it to be able to, and I know this is probably one of those vague questions that just probably can't answer, but how do you answer questions to someone who asks you questions about your artwork? Is it important to have the correct answer, or how does that correspondent work? Like, hey, I like this elephant, and I ask an odd question about it. Is your response like something that's really important for someone to buy that artwork, or what are they looking for if they're asking you questions, about a piece of art that you've done?
Sure. I do get questions on my artwork often, and I think most of the time the questions are based out of interest to purchase, and rather than just general inquiries about what the art means itself or something.
Sure.
And when somebody's asking about the artwork, if they're interested in purchasing it, often it comes down to like two things. How much is it, or how big is it? And if people can't afford it, then I try to encourage them. Well, actually, it all just kind of funnels down to really one or two options, which is a commissioned piece that could be a specific size that they're looking for. If the painting that they want is either too big or too small, can get them into the right size piece. Or if it's too expensive, perhaps they can, still get an original piece that is more within their budget.
Gotcha.
And if their budget, is under $1,000, then we look to limited edition prints, which, is a great way to get into art. And I, sell hundreds of those a month. So people really still value beautiful signed, limited numbered prints.
That's very cool. Yeah. Yeah. When I showed my daughter your site, she looked at the price and went, "Whoa." I said, "But look at
Yeah.
the size." She's like, "Oh, okay."
Yeah, yes.
Yeah.
I get
'Cause
that a
it's a
lot.
yeah, it's amazing, right? Because you look at something like, "Oh, look at the price of that," but then you go, "Oh, it's like the size of a wall." We get it,
Right, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, James, thanks for coming on and sharing your
Um,
story with us here at the QAC Team Podcast. I love talking to you. I'd love to
Likewise.
see more of your work, and I'd like to keep in touch with you on, see how your future endeavors go. And I hope my daughter will, watch this podcast and really, learn something from it, and maybe it'll inspire her to get back into it.
Oh yeah.
She's a really good artist, and I think she has, a good path with it, but. Nobody
Yeah.
can make their own path but them themselves, so
That's it. That's so
yeah.
true.
Yeah, I don't want to push anybody, I don't want to push them into anything they don't want to do,
Yeah.
And yeah, so thanks again for coming on and sharing your story. I had a great
Yeah.
time. And let's keep in touch and we'll talk soon.
That sounds great. Thank you so much.
Thanks, James. Have a great rest of your day.
You too.
Thank you. Bye.
You've been listening to the QAC Team podcast with your host, Charles Luttrell. Connect with us on the web at qacteam.com, TikTok at QAC Team, Facebook and Instagram at QAC.team. Thanks for your support.